In this module, we're going to talk about the theory specifically of disruptive innovation and disruptive technology. So we're going to lesson examples a little bit more on the theory. Let's start here. Talk about inflection points. I'm going to reference Andy Grove's book called Only the Paranoid Survive, which is an optional book on your reading list, but I highly recommend it. It's an excellent book. But he talks about these things he calls inflection points, where you'll notice that at that inflection point, which is a business decision, if you make one set of choices, your business can grow rapidly, and if you make another set of choices, your business can decline. It's why we say certain people make the big bucks, because they have to make those sorts of decisions. It's extremely difficult to be able to figure this out, and disruptive technologies play an enormous role. So, a couple quotes from his book. Business success contains the seeds of its own destruction. The more successful you are, the more people want a chunk of your business. I should point out, we're going to reference Clayton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma in just a moment. Andy Grove is a big subscriber to that. He believes in it strongly. Was sold on it directly by Clayton Christensen many years ago, and in fact, the success of Intel is a big part of the reason why Clayton Christensen's theory has really gone mainstream at this point. So I also believe that the primary responsibility of a manager is to guard constantly against other people's attacks, thus the name of his book. If you run a business, you must recognize that no amount of formal planning can anticipate such changes. That's the key quote. You can do all the strategic planning you want, talk to lots of people, you think you're ready for this, but how do you know that there aren't two guys in a garage someplace at this very moment inventing the future that is going to completely flip your world upside down? You don't know to talk to them, you don't know who they are, you don't know who their friends are, you might not even know what business they're in, but they may change the world. And this is the world that we live in today, is trying to figure out how to survive with that level of chaos. So this is Clay Christensen's book that you are reading some chapters out of. And a couple quotes from there. The decisions that led to failure were made when leaders in question were widely regarded as among the best companies in the world. There's a really wonderful example where they're talking about at the very time when I believe it was Forbes magazine was writing very flattering articles about Sears, the retailer, and the decisions that they were making and how they were really positioning themselves in a position of leadership in their market, was exactly the time, as we looked in hindsight, that they were making decisions that were going to put them in the very weak position that we find them in today. So you read in the paper today about who everybody is drooling over and saying is wonderful and making all the right choices, and in 5 years you may find out that at the very time when we were raving about them, they were killing themselves, unwittingly, of course. Next, precisely because these firms listened to their customers, invested aggressively in new technologies that would provide their customers more and better products of the sort they wanted, and because they carefully studied market trends and systematically allocated investment capital to innovations that promised the best returns, they lost their position of leadership. That's the dilemma, is that by paying too much attention to what's working today, you totally miss out on what's going to work tomorrow.
We've been firm believers that this is a revolution. The internet is a revolution that is greater than the Industrial Revolution. We're seeing today an unprecedented burst of creative energy for building new business relationships and disrupting old business relationships.
You make me feel like a fighter pilot flying a jet over enemy territory, and I've got all these surface-to-air missiles coming at me, and I know they're not all going to hit. Which ones, how do I tell which ones I really need to worry about?
TQM says you take the data and you do what the data says, right? And what is innovation, or what is taking advantage of disruptive technologies? It's going where there's no data.
It's a way of thinking about, as the disruption goes through an industry, how the ability to make money in the value chain shifts from one place to another.
We're working harder at improving the features and functions of our products, but customers seem to value them less.
We set up an entrepreneurial startup venture, is another way of saying we took two people and put them in a corner of the fifth floor.
A lot of startups are wildly successful because they're able to rethink the way that industry model exists.
It's technologically simple. Its success is not predicated upon some big technological breakthrough.
What happens is that when you improve and improve and improve, competing with your existing competitors for the affections of existing customers, that it opens the path for people to come in from underneath you and disrupt you.
Or AOL Time Warner strategy is really predicated upon huge new growth markets emerging at the high end. And if a huge new growth market emerges at the high end, it would be the first time in history.
Potential disruptions and sources of vulnerability that you may or may not be seeing.
And if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. That's what disruptive technologies are all about.
If you think about existing markets, it's sort of each market is a silo, and it's the grass between each silo.
Pick a target market segment and then focus very narrowly on that segment. Try to get as much vertical integration within that one segment as you can, and don't get distracted by the stuff on either side.
I'm really coming to think that for an established company, they don't have to create the market. As long as they've got this mental model and they're looking at that space, they can acquire.
We've invested in several different models that we think will basically destroy and recreate our business in a different way.
I developed this litmus test that I wanted to screen all the disruptive ideas through. And these are the points.
Startups have an unfair competitive advantage against large companies.
But that's really what this is talking about. Out-of-the-box thinking, higher technology risk, stronger market focus. It's really all about a new value system.
And he said, it's obvious what to do, I just don't know how to do it. To put money into low-margin disruptive businesses and still invest at the high-end sustaining businesses.
We were told, don't worry about whether your products will cannibalize existing business. Don't worry about it, because we'd rather have you do it than one of our competitors.
Consumers don't have a very good record of delightedly leaving a product that's better for a product that's worse. It's the right answer to the wrong question. I really want to be careful if I'm managing an innovation project to think independently. Not just do I have the resources to succeed, but is the organizational context in which they're putting me to work going to enable me to succeed because it fits with its processes and values. And I never want to say yes to a project where they're putting me to work in an organization that will doom me to failure.
So before we can get to an actual definition of disruptive technology, let's just talk about some of its characteristics here. So first of all, it's very important to keep in mind, when people first hear about disruptive technology, they want to paint everything as disruptive. And it's not. Not all change is disruptive. In fact, most of it is just about making things better. That's what the world is all about. Everybody's trying to make things better. But they tend to be on the same improvement trajectory, which makes them sustaining technologies or sustaining improvements. That's the norm. So real innovation is actually going to happen as a result of disruption. Disruption equals innovation. They really go together. But it's really hard to identify, especially a priori. That is, I've got this really cool thing. Now I'm going to predict how it's going to change an industry. That's very difficult to do. And it's really even harder. What we have to do is react effectively, to know how we're going to react to this. Now in this example, think about this. It's just an analogy. So imagine that this surface represents all the possible designs of consumer-grade video players. It's a terrain, meaning that The high points are the really great designs, and the low points are the not very good designs. So you would like to think that the peaks are going to be the winners and the valleys are going to be the losers. So what do we got? So here's maybe where the design of a DVD actually is. And here's the design of a Blu-ray. And because the Blu-ray is a logical hill climb from a DVD, it's a sustaining improvement. That orange line there just shows how you get from a DVD to a Blu-ray. Well, that's nice. That's how the world works. Well, here's my question. Where is video in demand on this? How about streaming Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, things like that? Those technologies don't have anything to do with DVD and Blu-ray, and yet in the marketplace, they're kind of kicking the stuffing out of DVDs and Blu-rays. So how are we supposed to plan for this? Are they here? Are they over here? The main thing is that they're going to have their own sustaining improvements to get better as well. The thing that you absolutely know is that they're not on the same trajectory as a DVD. No question about it. Also, they're at a point that's lower than a DVD. Is that not true? I mean, I'd much rather have a DVD for watching a movie than have Netflix streaming in terms of the quality of the video. I can seek and find different places in my movie faster. The resolution might be better. There's a whole bunch of things that are better about DVDs. But why is Netflix winning then? Netflix is winning because you changed the parameter of what constitutes a good design. Netflix comes to me anytime I want, gives me a huge library. I don't have to go find the disc. It's got a whole bunch of wins that DVDs don't have. This is the point. You change the rules. You win by changing the rules. Okay, so now we're finally going to get to a definition, a real definition of disruptive technologies. This is the part you really want to remember, if nothing else. So first of all, they tend to apply most to underserved or niche markets. Now, if you remember from the picture, and we're going to show it to you again in a moment, this is where disruptive technologies get their start. They have to have a niche market. It's small, which is why nobody's paying attention to them, but it's important to have that market because the revenue from that little market is what drives the innovation. They're also of lesser quality than the mainstream technology. It's always the case. They're always much poorer in some cases than the mainstream, which is also why nobody's paying any attention to them. But they appeal to users on a different set of performance characteristics than the mainstream competition, which is also why nobody pays any attention to them. They're never asked for by the customer, ever. So the example that Christensen talks about with regard to disk drives, if you're a salesman for one of the big disk drive vendors and you go to your customer, why is your customer going to tell you, you know, I really don't want that many megabytes. I want less megabytes. Well, megabytes was the only thing that mattered at that point. So if that's the only metric, that's the news he's going to take back to the company. Engineers, we need more megabytes, so we keep making the disk bigger and with larger capacity. Nobody ever thought to ask them, hey, what if I could make it smaller and make it portable or make it less power or whatever it is that you need, something that would be a little bit different. Nobody thought to ask, somebody built it. And of course, the world changed. I include this to give you an example of just how bad a disruptive innovation can actually be. This is a card, if you can read it, from the log file of the first internet, then called the ARPANET transmission. Happened on October 29, 1969. You had somebody from UCLA connecting to a machine at the Stanford Research Institute in Palo Alto and simply tried to log onto the machine. And all he got was LO before it crashed. Now, can you imagine an executive looking at this saying, this innovation is going to totally change the world? He'd laugh. He'd say, you got 2 characters sent from one computer to another, and this is going to change the world, right? So I bring this up because most of the innovations that we can think of that really do change the world started out really bad at first, but they got a lot better. So this is the picture that you've seen before, that sort of disruptive technologies in a nutshell, but just to give you a quick summary again, the red dotted line is the progress due to sustaining technologies for the market leader. The green is for the disruptor. And the key here is that once that disruptor crosses that bottom dotted line, that is the bottom metric for what is the performance demanded by this marketplace, watch out, market leader, because your customers are going to be abandoning you in droves and going to the cheaper but but good enough technology. So this is the example out of Christensen's book with disk drives, just to show you that just in that one market segment, this didn't just happen once or twice. It's happened 4 times it's been disrupted. And it's about to be disrupted for the 5th time. And nobody ever learns from this, is what's interesting, is because the leaders in the 14-inch drive market are not the same as the leaders in the 8-inch drive market, which are not the same as the leaders in the 5 1/4 market, which are not the same as the leaders in the 3 1/2-inch market, which are not the same as the leaders in the 2 1/2-inch market, and are certainly not going to be the leaders in flash drives and cloud storage. It's going to be disrupted again. It's in the process of being disrupted. So this is an extraordinarily difficult thing to get our brains around, is how to sort of kill the cash cow in order to address the future. That's why it's a dilemma. So think about this. Why did this happen? Or what happened to these companies, and why did it happen? Why were they unable to identify an up-and-coming technology? This is what we do. We're always reading things and trying to figure out who's doing what. It just keeps happening over and over again. And why weren't they able to switch to it when it was clear that the market was changing? All right, so now we're getting into the nuts and bolts. Up to now, you're probably saying to yourself, this is all very interesting, but you're not telling me anything at all about what to do about this. You're just sort of saying, it's a horrible problem, and it's probably going to bite you in the bottom, but, you know, nothing you can really do about it. Well, there are some things you can do about it if you really understand it. So let's go back and link what we just talked about in terms of inflection points to disruptive technology theory. So these are the curves that you've seen before. So what happens if you make the jump early? So you are on the market leader. You're doing your thing. This is who you're doing business with. And you say, you know what? There's this upstart down here. This is going to be the future. We're going to jump early. What happens? Well, what happens is this. You see the jump on the top graph. The bottom graph is market share, or at least your position in the market. At t equals 0, you're at the peak. That's the inflection point. And what happens is, this is the innovator's dilemma, because you actually have to admit that things are going to get worse before they get better. Because you jumped to an inferior technology. You jumped to an inferior technology. Your competitors are sticking with the good stuff, so they're going to take your market share away from you. You voluntarily gave it to them. But look at what happens in the out years. As you look off into the future, that technology is going to get better. You are going to be in the position of dominance, and they're going to be the followers, not the leaders. So the good news in all of this is that disruptive technologies are very hypersensitive to first movers. What does that mean? In industry, this means you get to write the rules. You get to set the standards. You get the biggest market share. You get it the fastest and the easiest, because there is no market there. You're defining it, right? This is why you want to be the first mover. Implications for us in DoD, since we don't much care about market share, is we get to drive the technology rather than be driven by it. A lot of times we can participate in the development of standards. We can even have a stake in these things as they move ahead. And we can keep it open rather than proprietary, or at least buy the government a cheap entry fee, because in the early days, these companies are looking for any capital they can. We can get in cheap early and buy ourselves a long-term future. Right? So a really good example is what In-Q-Tel, if you don't know what In-Q-Tel is, you can look them up. That's the CIA's venture capital firm, invested in a little company called Keyhole. Anybody know what Keyhole was? Well, Keyhole became this. A great technology for Intel, for the CIA, now becomes Google Earth. And the CIA has benefited from this for years and years, because this is a high-quality product we bought in early, and now the CIA's interests are preserved. But there's also some bad news that goes along with the early jump. Early adoption is typically below the minimal performance benchmark. Remember, this is the point is nobody's paying attention to this guy because he's below the minimum standard. There's no product there. So this usually only applies to hobbyists and early adopters, and you have to wait for that technology to improve. So you're probably bailing out of a highly profitable, or at least a highly usable, from our perspective, market in favor of an unprofitable one that may have a huge upside that might even be bigger than the market that you're in. Right? Again, this is why we call this the innovator's dilemma. All right, now let's look at the alternative. What if I make the jump late? All right, so I'm not doing it earlier. Now I'm going to wait and see until that green line gets above the minimum standard. I'm just going to play the wait and see game. What happens? Well, in this case, what I get is at time t equals 0, right, I didn't do anything. I waited until time t1. And then I make my jump. Now look what happens. The market leaders are already defined, and quite possibly I have nothing to say about it. I can just buy the product is the best I can possibly do. I have nothing to say. And possibly, if I'm in industry in this case, the market leaders are already defined, and I am not them. So now I'm the green line. I'm now going to decline, while that upstart, who I might have been chuckling at just a short time ago when he cut his own throat and gave up his market share to me, right, now takes it all back, and then some. Now the good news with a late jump is this, that the technology is probably at a state that's beyond minimum, it's above minimum performance requirements, it's a mainstream product, it's readily available, it's ready for you to go. So, like people used to say, nobody got fired for buying IBM. Nobody got fired for buying Microsoft. But it wasn't where the innovation was. The bad news is this, you're too late. So you may be locked into whoever was the first mover. And I'm not saying that we always, as government, have to be the ones that are jumping in ahead and making sure that we are the innovators and the market leaders. That's not necessarily our job. We have to pick and choose where we're going to do this. But if you're talking about a core technology to your business, you better be paying attention to this, and you better protect your organization by making good decisions that put you in a leadership position within those industries. So licensing, usage rules, standards, they all may be set by somebody else. And if you hate them, too bad. You didn't participate, so you don't get to say anything. So implications for us is that the cost could be a lot higher, especially maintenance. Right? We didn't pay up front, we're going to pay on the backside. And you possibly end up with another legacy system because you may not really be able to architect the system the way you want to because you didn't participate up front. So I took this scenario from Clayton Christensen's book. Think about this. So scenario A, you have a manager who says, who's going to buy this thing? And marketing says, well, there's a whole segment in the workstation industry. They buy $600 million in drives every year. We've just been able to reach this. Capacity points aren't there. I think this product might just be able to get us there. Have you run this idea past potential customers yet? Yeah, I was in California. We talked to everybody. Everything's good. There's a design window opening up in 9 months. We've figured all the engineering out. We know how to market this. We know how to supply it. We know how to build it. I really think we can do this. All right, but what does engineering think we can do? Well, they think it'll be a stretch, but they always say that. What kind of margins are we talking about? If we can build it in our current factory, I think we can get close to 35%. Typical discussion between management and marketing on a mainstream sustaining technology improvement. All right, so here's the same discussion with a disruptive technology. Who's going to buy it? Well, I'm not sure, but there's got to be a market out there somewhere for people for it. So people always want things smaller and less expensive. I could see them using it maybe in fax machines or printers. Have you run this idea past any potential customers? Yeah, I sketched it out for one of our current customers, and he said he was interested but couldn't see how they would really use it yet. They need at least 270 megabytes to do anything useful, so they're really not going to be ready for this for a while. Do you think we could make any money on this? Well, I think so, but that depends on how we price it and how the market responds. All right, so which of these two projects do you think is going to get the green light? A or B? Pretty obvious, A is going to get the attention, B is going to get the pat on the head, nice work, come back to me in 6 months and maybe we'll have this discussion again. But like we just learned, that may be too late. So some typical criticisms of what we hear about disruptive technology theory from practical working people is this. Why should I care about disruptive technologies and inflection points if I can only identify them in my rearview mirror? What good does that do me? And if I can correctly identify a technology as disruptive, how do I determine what the right course of action is? And we're the government. We shouldn't even have a role in this. Just let the market figure it out, and we'll just buy whatever they're selling. My point is this. Innovation and risk go together. The question is, and if you think that even as government that your job is not about mitigating risk, well then you're kidding yourself, because it is. The question is how you mitigate this risk while reaping the potential benefits of innovation. This is what we're trying to accomplish. So again, from Christensen's book, some principles of disruption. First, customers control the pattern of resource allocation. That is, resources go to the products that sell. Again, this is why it's a dilemma. How does management reallocate resources away from a successful product to one that might only be successful? You have to really have some vision and be able to drive the future in order to make that type of a call. Second, small markets don't solve the growth needs for big companies. You're looking at IBM, you look at Microsoft, Apple Computer. They're not interested in small markets. Small markets are small margins and are small profits. They're just not interested. This is why it tends to be little upstart companies that tend to do the most innovating. 3, the use of disruptive technologies are unknowable in advance. Let's say that again. They are unknowable in advance. This is the point that we were making earlier where we said no amount of formal planning is going to solve your problem. You can guess, but you can't know. 4, organizations have capabilities that are independent of the people who work for them. So the capability of a company is not the sum of the capability of its people. It's more than that. But this can also identify a limitation or a liability when dealing with disruption. Like, what if you don't properly reward some level of risk-taking? You're going to have a problem. 5, technology supply may not equal market demand. So the very attribute that may make a technology unattractive to an established market is what makes it attractive to an emerging one. All right, lastly, what should you do? Now that you know about disruptive technologies, we've taught you everything we know about it, what should you do? First, embed projects to develop and commercialize disruptive technologies within organizations who have customers who might need them. So don't try and force the issue. Create an agile organization that is allowed to have smaller margins and can sell to smaller niche markets. Put these projects in organizations small enough to care about them. 3, plan to fail early and inexpensively. Now that's a good one for us in government since we're not interested in profits. You can spread your resources around and you can plan in such a way that you can test out some of these new ideas in a way that if they fail, it's not going to cost you too much. You've invested. If it works out, you're going to reap a benefit. And if it doesn't work out, you're not going to be hurt too badly. That's the way to plan. 4, leverage resources from the mainstream, but don't leverage its processes. Its processes tend to be the things that get in the way. So you might need some resources like good engineers and good thought leaders, but not necessarily those processes. And you want to get people to think outside those processes in order to innovate. And lastly, always look to new markets when placing a disruptive technology. Don't try to adapt an old market to some new disruptive technology. You actually look at some new market, somebody who's actually looking at a market in a different way and actually is interested in transforming it. So that's the essence of disruptive technology theory. You've been through all the main text, and you can read through in more detail, get some more examples. But you can see how complicated this is and why it's really captured the imagination of industry, is that there's so many good examples where it just keeps happening over and over again, and yet from a management standpoint, it's extremely problematic to even know what to do about it. But there are some actions that we could take, and knowing about disruptive innovation and thinking this way and managing this way certainly puts you and your organization in a better position for success.